Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, May the 9th, 2024. Yesterday I talked about Converse transits and Converse solar returns. This is the idea that time moves backwards as well as forwards. So in other words, if we want to know what's going on when we're 60 years old, we don't just look at what's going on in the sky 60 years after we're born. We look at what's going on in the sky 60 years before we were born. So, if you like, our birth is like a ripple, like you throw a stone into a pond, and the ripple goes out in all directions. It doesn't just go in one way. It goes out it goes out in a circle. And so by looking at the ripple in the past, we can get an idea about the future. And I wanted to continue on this theme of converse solar returns, converse transits, by looking at some more examples. And I'm going to look at Prince William today. Someone suggested Prince William. Why not? I looked at Prince Harry yesterday, and I wanted to look at his converse solar return. That means you look at what was going on in his life in 1967. Because Prince William was born in 1982. And so his mother died in 1997, so that would be 15 years later. So we go back 15 years. So we go back to 1967, to his birthday, 1967, which was actually his birthday coincided obviously with the solstice, because he was born at the solstice. And if you look at what was going on, apparently his birthday, 1967, was apparently the summer of love. I don't know if you're into the history of hippies and so on. 1967 was the summer of love, but apparently there was a particular day of love, which was the solstice. The solstice, summer solstice, 1967, was arguably the peak of the summer of love. I think that's just a coincidence, but it kind of links to Prince William and his mother's death, weird as that sound. But I'll be looking at other people as well, just to explore whether it really works. Can we really look backwards at time? It's such a strange concept, but it's astrology, and I think if we're astrologers, I think that we have to see time in ways that other people don't, that it can move in all kinds of directions. But first of all, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today. So let's see. So here we are. Here is the positions of the planets for today, which is Thursday, May the 9th, 2024. And you will see that the moon is in Gemini, well and truly in Gemini. Doesn't matter what your time zone is, that's where it is. And I think that might be a bit of a relief for some of us. I mean, there hasn't been much air around. Okay, we've had Pluto in Aquarius, but where's the air? Can we breathe? And now we've got the moon in Gemini, perhaps we can breathe more. We don't have to take things quite so seriously. There's a bit of levity, and that's what moon in Gemini is often about, being able to move from place to place, having some flexibility, and not being so tied to a fixed course of action. And yeah, we can make last minute changes. And so I think that moon in Gemini is just going to make things perhaps a little lighter than they have been of late. And this moon in Gemini makes a sextile to Mars in Aries. And so Moon in Gemini, sextile Mars in Aries is about perhaps successful action. We want to do something, we just go and do it. Or perhaps we talk about it first and then we do it a bit later. I mean, one thing about Moon in Gemini that should be said is that there is a certain contradiction to Moon in Gemini, because the Moon is an emotional planet. Yeah, I know it's not a planet, it's a satellite, but it just makes it easier to call it a planet. But the Moon is an emotional planet, and it's a feminine planet. It's responsive, it's receptive, and then it's in Gemini. I mean, how does that work? One thing about Moon in Gemini is it can use words as a defense mechanism. So the Moon is trying to protect itself. It's in a situation it doesn't fully understand. So when it's in Moon in Gemini, what does it do? It talks. You just keep talking, keep talking, and eventually whatever's bothering you will go away. At least can be the theory behind Moon in Gemini. Moon in Gemini can actually try to avoid the issue. Not by not talking, but by talking a lot. But by trying to steer the conversation away from what you don't want to cover. So if things are going in a way you feel uncomfortable with, you talk and you kind of move, you change the direction, and sometimes that can make things easier. Another aspect happening today, is Mercury decile Saturn. Mercury is in Aries, and there's Saturn. So Mercury and Saturn are 36 degrees apart. And I think that this decile Saturn is going to mean many of us are going to want to stabilize things, particularly on a mental level. You know, we have ideas and we perhaps want to bring these ideas down to earth, and it's tough. We know that perhaps some of our ideas are unrealistic or can't be achieved right now. And so we might feel we have to make a special effort to bring these ideas down to earth and create some concept of reality, of things happening in the here and now. Another way of looking at Mercury decile Saturn could be that some of us feel that we have to make an impression through the things we say, and we might feel that we have to actually be deliberately a little bit harsh in our words, because we take the view, perhaps that's the only way that we're going to be taken seriously, or maybe we feel that we have to get people to sit up and listen, or it may just be that someone is annoying us and we feel that they need to be criticized, and we want to use words that force them to change their ways. It's a dangerous strategy, but I think it's a strategy that some people might be inclined to take. And those two aspects, Moon sextile Mars, Mercury decile Saturn, they are the main aspects today. It's not actually a very active day, astrologically. From a midpoint perspective, the Sun continues to be on the conjunction. The Sun continues to be conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and I've talked about this midpoint link quite a lot over the last few days, and as I've said, it is fortunate. Venus and Jupiter are a fortunate pair, so when the Sun is conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, things can actually move, and an optimistic attitude, even in the face of a difficult situation, can really work and can be very effective. But at the same time, Mercury is aspecting the Pluto node midpoint. That's a very different energy. The Pluto node midpoint is about the world at large. And Reinhold Ebertin says about this aspect, this pair, the Pluto node pair, that Reinhold Ebertin says that it's about something like the tragic destiny of a large group of people. And so with Mercury aspecting the Pluto node midpoint, that's perhaps what we become aware of. I mean, if we want to have a nice day, it might be a good idea not to spend too much time looking at the news or considering social problems or worrying about what's going on around the world, because if we were to spend a lot of time looking at the news, we would perhaps forget a sense of great tragedy. There are many people around the world are suffering, and I think, I mean, that's always the case. I mean, it's not that today is a particular day for suffering, perhaps, but Mercury on the Pluto node midpoint, but some of us can be very sensitive to that. We see that there is a group of people who are in pain, and that kind of affects us. I don't think this is going to affect us personally. It's not about our suffering. It's just about our awareness that other people are suffering. And I suppose we have to decide, how we're going to respond, or indeed whether there's any point in responding. I know it's tempting to think that we can do something by demonstrating or writing letters to members of parliament or congressmen or whoever you write letters to, depending on where you are. But is it worth it? But it's something perhaps that needs to be thought about. Another thing happening today is that we have got Venus aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. We had Venus aspecting a Mars-Saturn midpoint, but I don't think I explicitly mentioned it yesterday. So with Venus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, certain relationships can be hard work. You may try to get close to someone, but immediately you start getting close to them, you actually start having to deal with their problems and their concerns and whatever's going wrong in their life, and people may be more inclined than usual to dump their problems and their concerns onto you. But I suppose it works both ways, doesn't it? Be careful about dumping your problems and concerns onto other people. It's just possible that they might not be interested. Turning to the heliocentric picture, remember, this is the solar system from the perspective of the sun, when we put the sun in the middle of the solar system, where it should be, of course. I don't think a great deal has changed since yesterday, but I just do this as a reminder. Notice that the Earth is quincunx Chiron. That is a small aspect, it's a minor aspect, but I think that this may link actually with geocentric Mercury on the Pluto node midpoint. I think that some of us with Chiron is aware of other people's pain. Chiron is a wounded healer after all, and with Earth quincunx Chiron down here on Earth, we are aware of pain and suffering and people's wounds, and I think there may be a certain sense of compassion about Earth quincunx Chiron, but the question is, what do we do? What can we do about it? It's like there is a problem there which is upsetting us. I'm talking about a problem primarily relating to other people probably we don't know. It's a problem that it's upsetting us, but at the same time we're thinking, well, what can we do about it? And with that quincunx, perhaps a challenge is to work out what to do about it. So that would be one way of looking at the Earth quincunx Chiron. Though you could take Chiron as a maverick. We are tempted to sort of not tempted, but we're supposed to act in a particular way, but we know that doing things the usual way is somehow the wrong way of doing things, and we need to be able to act in a more dynamic and spontaneous way, and something which is not necessarily going to make us friends. That is a maverick. And the challenge perhaps is to be unique, because that's what's required of us. So that is another way of looking at Earth quincunx Chiron. Aside from that, Jupiter is now sextile Neptune. Heliocentric Jupiter is sextile heliocentric Neptune. It is a time when many of us are going to be quite optimistic, but we have to be careful about naivety. We might just think that things are happening, and that we can rest on our laurels now because things are really going to work, and that's Jupiter sextile Neptune. But I suppose the challenge with Jupiter sextile Neptune is it's a sextile, and our trines and sextiles are slightly different. The difference between a trine and a sextile is that a sextile is a little more work than a trine. So Jupiter sextile Neptune is not quite as complacent as Jupiter trine Neptune. So Jupiter sextile Neptune is maybe at its best would be taking some wonderful transcendent idea and working out how best to actually put it into practice for it to actually become part of our broad but practical vision. And then we have got the Mars-Saturn conjunction. You can see yesterday, Mars and the heliocentric Mars-Saturn conjunction. Yesterday it was 6 degrees apart. Now it's only 5 degrees apart. So it's getting closer, and it's just something we're monitoring, that Mars-Saturn conjunction. We're not there yet, but we will soon, I think, start to feel it, or at least the world will soon start to feel it. And that is the heliocentric picture as I see it. I'm sure there's more stuff going on, but I just haven't spent enough time on it. And what I'm going to do now is look at today, Thursday, May the 9th, from the perspective of the 12 signs. Now, a reminder, there isn't actually much going on today. I always say this. I say, oh, well, there's not much going on today. And I said, I'm going to be more brief with my forecast for the 12 signs, but then I end up spending exactly the same time as usual. So I would like to be briefer on the 12 signs today, but maybe I won't succeed. So go back to the geocentric position. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, May the 9th, 2024. Aries. The main aspect today, which certainly has an impact on you, is a sextile between the Moon and Mars. This sextile should be entirely fortunate. Mars is your ruler. It's in Aries. Don't forget that. I know Mars has been in Aries for some time, but it's not gonna stay in Aries forever and ever. In the end, Mars will move out of Aries. It will move into Taurus. I think that happens in early June. But you need to take advantage of the power that is available to you with Mars in your sign. And today we have Moon sextile Mars, which gives you a real opportunity to assert yourself. And you can assert yourself in many ways, but verbal assertion, saying what's on your mind, being very clear about what you mean, could be very effective. It's not like you have to be physically assertive. No, it's the words that count. Maybe not just words, the sort of body language, the whole way you express who you are and what you want. And you can assert yourself in such a way that people are not going to be afraid or offended. It will just be something very easy. Okay, a little bit of work on your part is required. This is Moon sextile Mars. A sextile is not as easy an aspect as a trine, but with sextiles generally you have more control than with a trine, and so I think you are going to be in control, and I think you're going to be perhaps in control through what you say, and also with timing. I think timing is going to be really important today. So if you want to have an impact, the time you make a phone call, the time you walk into a room, this is going to be important. Okay, you don't have to worry too much about time. Just trust your instincts there. But if the time has arrived, I think that you're just going to feel it. It's just going to be the natural moment when you do need to assert yourself. But avoid being too much of an authority figure. I know that if you're trying to assert yourself, you do need to demonstrate some kind of authority. I do understand that. But you need to be careful that you don't overstate your authority. Because if you were to overstate your authority, things might not work out. Because the trouble is that as soon as you say, I am an authority figure, you almost make yourself vulnerable. You're saying, you're telling the world, I'm an authority figure, go challenge me. Challenge my authority, go ahead. And if your authority is challenged, then things might go wrong. You might find that your vulnerabilities start coming to the surface. So I would resist the temptation of going too far in the way you're assertive. You should be assertive in a gentle way. What you mustn't do is try to claim some kind of authority which makes you right in all cases. Don't try to bring the law down on people. And this especially applies if you are in a position of authority. If you're in a position of authority, you get your way on the small things. But if you feel that you have to emphasize the fact that you're in a position of authority, then I'm thinking that things could go wrong. And in the end, you could be in a situation where you are actually very confused. Turning to relationships, yesterday I think I mentioned that Venus was on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Well, Venus is still on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And some of the people you are having to interact with today are not on best form. They may feel sorry for themselves, or indeed they may, in certain situations, want to take out their own problems on you and on other people. So when dealing with people, especially on a one-to-one level, tread carefully. I suppose this is not about the group. It's about perhaps some of the important individuals in your life. Tread carefully and consider the possibility that something is bothering with them, and consider the possibility that whatever's bothering them is in some way impacting their behavior. And you therefore mustn't jump to conclusions, and perhaps you need to ask yourself, what can you do? Maybe there's something you can do. You know, I mentioned, I think yesterday, that Mercury was conjunct Chiron. Mercury is still conjunct Chiron. It's now Mercury conjunct Chiron in Aries, remember. Mercury is still conjunct Chiron, but it's moving away from Chiron now. That conjunction is not as strong as it used to be. So that does raise the possibility that you can be useful, that you can offer some kind of assistance, some kind of gentle healing through your words. That is possible. But some people aren't interested. They don't want to hear reassuring words. They're not going to listen. In which case, Aries, then I think it's probably just best to leave them alone and let them work things out in their own way. Taurus, you do feel, Taurus, that there are things that are wrong. You can't help it. You look at the world, you look at what's going on, and it's not right. And this does quite obviously lead to a certain sense of negativity. Maybe you're just being too literal. That is possible. You're seeing things perhaps that could be difficult, that could be a problem, and you are maybe jumping to the wrong conclusions. And you're making things seem worse than they actually are. So, Taurus, I would advise you, if you are feeling negative, to ask yourself actually why you're feeling negative. What is it all about? Where did it all start? I'm thinking that in most cases it's about cognition. You are just perceiving something very ordinary in the wrong way. And maybe just it's a case of just snapping out of it. I won't go too far on it. I suppose, they always like to say get a grip. That's a terrible term, get a grip. It's not that bad. But maybe you are picking up on something that is important. You're picking up on something that is difficult, is problematic, is genuinely difficult, is genuinely problematic. It may not be your issue, but perhaps you are making it your issue, and perhaps that is why you are feeling a bit negative. And in order to deal with the issue, it may be that you need to change your focus. So it might be that exercise could be useful today, assuming that you're able to take exercise, that it's medically appropriate for you to take exercise. But a lot of exercise today could really go a long way towards redirecting your energy, because there is a certain sense of frustration for Taurians at the moment. And I think it's perhaps made more difficult by the fact that the moon has changed signs now. The moon is no longer in Taurus, it's in Gemini. And so with the moon in Gemini, you may be feeling that there's a whole new set of concerns, perhaps relating to money. After all, from a Taurian perspective, the sign Gemini can have connections with money. And some Taurians may be worrying a bit about money. Have I got enough money? Should I be making more money? What am I doing with my savings? Have I got enough savings? These are the sort of questions you might have with Moon in Gemini. And of course, once Moon in Gemini starts asking questions, then it doesn't know when to stop. But that Moon in Gemini is sextile Mars. And that does suggest a solution. And Mars could represent another person. After all, Mars rules Scorpio, which is your opposite sign. So with Moon sextile Mars, you can benefit from another person's advice if there's something bothering you, especially if it's a financial issue. There is someone you can talk to, I think, who perhaps has a greater sense of understanding than you short term. Now, that's not the same as falling into the clutches of someone who gives you bad financial advice. It's not necessarily about going to someone for financial advice, asking someone to, for example, tell you what to do with your money. No, it's about just someone giving you a broad perspective, and that's perhaps what you need. But aside from money, if there is something bothering you, that's having an adverse impact on your happiness, then that Moon sextile Mars does indicate that by talking to someone and being open about what's bothering you, then that can make a huge difference. Though I don't really feel entirely comfortable about the way I've been describing what's going on for Taurus today. It just seems a bit overly negative, and I don't mean to be overly negative, because there are good things going on today. I mean, I think that we have to remember that the Sun is moving through Taurus, and the Sun is conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and Venus-Jupiter as a pair are very positive. And so perhaps what needs to happen, Taurus, is that you need to change your focus. I think perhaps what's happened maybe is that you have decided to focus on one thing. And of course, being a Taurus, you're quite stubborn, and you've decided that one thing is important. And what you just need to do is shift that focus. You're focusing on something that doesn't look good, that doesn't bring good feelings. But if you were to change that focus, which you can do, especially now that Moon is in Gemini, you change that focus, then you can start tuning into the fact that the Sun is in your sign on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. There's something out there that can really make you feel happy and optimistic. But you have to find it. It mustn't be a random process. You could end up just try this. Does this make me happy? Does this make me happy? Does this make me happy? No. No, you've just got to have big vision. What is the thing that is working? Where is the place where you feel comfortable? If you can't work it out for yourself, maybe ask someone else, get someone's opinion, talk to someone, trust someone. You can't trust everyone, but trust the right persons, just so that you can get that refocus. And once you're in the right area, you'll know it, because you'll suddenly start to feel a lot happier, and the day could completely transform very much for the better. Gemini, the Moon is in your sign. Doesn't matter what your time zone is, the Moon is in Gemini. And I think Geminis in the main are going to be pretty happy about that. The Moon, it's in an air sign. You can flow again. Things have been a little bit overwhelming for some Geminis, but finally things are starting to move, and you can see possibilities which in the recent past just hadn't seemed to be there, but now they are there, and you're finding it much easier to communicate. You can tell people what's on your mind, and at the same time you can think very carefully about how you want to express yourself. Though you can't just say whatever you want, because there is a Mercury decile Saturn, and Mercury decile Saturn might encourage you to adopt a particular style, and this style could, in certain cases, spoil the day. For example, Mercury decile Saturn may encourage you to be harsh. You want to say things and you plan what you're going to say, and you end up planning things which cause maybe a little bit of offense, a little bit of upset. After all, the pair Mercury-Saturn can be about saying things which upset people, using strong language, knowing exactly what words to use to cause maximum damage. That can be Mercury decile Saturn. A better way of using Mercury decile Saturn would be to say, well, things are not 100% perfect. There are areas of your life. Remember, I'm a Gemini, so I'm talking about myself as well. There are things in your life which are chaotic. Yeah, certainly in my life things are chaotic. If I just move that camera and just increase the zoom, you would see you would see a bomb crater. But we all have areas of our life which are chaotic, and with that Mercury decile Saturn, we do actually have an opportunity to clear it all out and to take the things that are chaotic. Now might be the time to do it. We can say, I want a vision. There's a particular vision I want to experience and be part of. It's a vision which is more organized, and today with this Mercury decile Saturn really might be the time to actually do it. Though there are other things to do, other things to engage with. The moon is sextile Mars, moon in Gemini, sextile Mars. There are, I think, people to engage with, people who are perhaps trying to be in contact with you. You need to be in contact with them. Time passes. It really does. I find that, I get an email, I see the email, I don't want to deal with it now, and then before I know it, 2 weeks have passed and I'm coming over as being completely rude. So you have to try to be more proactive in the way you handle your communications, and realize that people are out there for you. You can help them, they can help you, and you need to seize the moment. If you take people for granted and assume that they're just going to always be there, then in the end they will just disappear. And with Moon sextile Mars, I think this is a chance for you to actually reach out, tell the world that you are here, that you are there for them. And I think that you'll get a pretty positive response. Cancer. With the moon in Gemini, you're possibly not in the mood for having a super busy social life. You'd prefer to spend time on your own, all things being equal. And I think that's okay, because from a Cancerian view, Gemini is quite isolated. It's quite an isolated sign. It's the sign before Cancer, and so when the moon is going through Gemini, for Cancerians, it can often be a time of preparation, when you need to sort of step back, get a feel for the way things are going, and do some preparation, and also allow yourself to float free. By float free, I mean imagine things, perhaps listen to your dreams, do things that you want to do without having to explain. I mean, after all, when the moon is in Gemini, that says something about how Cancerians express themselves. And after all, because the moon is your ruler. And so when the moon is in Gemini, it's a sign that is flexible, that likes to move from place to place. And that's perhaps what you want to do, but in a way that is not in the spotlight. You can explore your own world, you can explore different ideas, and you don't have to talk about it, you don't have to involve people in it. Though this moon in Gemini is sextile Mars, and that does give us some more information. If you are involved in an organization, or you're trying to make progress in a particular direction, perhaps in terms of your work or in terms of building up your sense of being a leader, whatever is relevant to you, you can certainly do things to improve your position and to improve your status today. After all, Mars is in Aries. That's very strong. That is about you being out there, being successful, getting noticed, and being able to express the full power of your personality. And the moon is in Aries. Sorry, Mars is in Aries. Mars has been in Aries for a little bit of time. It went into Aries over a week ago. It's going to stay in Aries until the beginning of next month. And the moon is sextile, because the moon is sextile because the moon is sextile Mars, you can take steps to improve your position, but steps which may not be entirely obvious. And so it might be a time when Cancerians can act behind the scenes to perhaps strengthen their position, and in a way that may actually be ever so slightly devious. You don't really want to be noticed. That's the whole nature of acting behind the scenes. And in certain cases, with Moon in Gemini, you may have to say one thing and do something else. Now, I'm not encouraging you to lie. It's just that if people are asking questions, people are being curious, you don't really want to explain yourself. And so it may just be simpler to say one thing, just whatever shuts people up, because in that way you can just do what you want to do, and you can have the freedom that is really important to you. Leo. It continues in the sense that the Sun continues to be on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. Sun conjunct Venus-Jupiter midpoint. I think I talked about it yesterday. And yes, it is fortunate, and it's a time when, if you handle yourself in the right way, that things can really work out. And perhaps you need to ask yourself why things can work out. And things can work out if you are positive and optimistic. Just be a Leo and try to spread this optimism, get other people involved in it. It may feel not entirely appropriate. Sure, there's a lot to be negative about. The world is full of problems. But from your personal perspective, Leo, I think that you're in the perfect place to, make things happen, and to have a vision, and to just think about what is the best possible outcome, because the best possible outcome can be the outcome, and you can make it perhaps happen through positive thoughts and through positive actions, and by encouraging people. And encouraging people is going to be important. As a Leo, you can sometimes be a little bit overly focused on yourself. That's just the nature of Leo. But what perhaps matters, what is a true mark of your success and your greatness, is being able to pass that sense of selfhood on onto other people. It's about empowering other people, because if you can empower other people, then you're actually empowering yourself, and what is empowering them is really your vision. And you're further helped by the fact that the moon is in Gemini and it is sextile Mars. And so with the moon in Gemini sextile Mars, you have a lot of energy, and that energy is actually quite exciting. I mean, I think people are going to find it exciting. So if you tell people what's possible, if you encourage people to do things, the energy will be quite apparent, will be quite obvious to everyone, and that energy will help to move everything forward. And don't ask too many questions. I understand some questions have to be asked, but if you're engaged in something big and optimistic, what could spoil it is just thinking, well, maybe if this went wrong, what would happen? Then if that went wrong, it would be a disaster. And by focusing on what can go wrong, then then you might really spoil things. It's like, with bumblebees. Someone told me that from a scientific point of view, it's impossible for bumblebees to fly. I'm sure there's a very good, obviously there's a scientific explanation to why bumblebees can fly. But I heard someone say that it's scientifically impossible for bumblebees to fly. I know that's wrong, but still, it's that concept. Just be happy that the bumblebee is flying. If something is starting to work, don't ask questions. If it's working, it's working. If it's beginning to work, it's beginning to work. The key thing, Leo, is to have the vision. And you know what, Leo? I don't want to spoil things by saying anything more. I just want to leave you with the idea that if you want it to be a great day, and it can be a great day, and just remember that the interaction between you and other people is important. If you care about other people, if you empower other people, then you will be empowering yourself. And so it's looking good. Virgo, you're quite ambitious today, I think. I think, Virgo, that there are certainly things that you want. You want them as soon as possible, and you're able to take a stand, and I think that is good. And you benefit from a sextile aspect between the moon and Mars. So moon sextile Mars is going to allow you to bring to bear a considerable amount of power, but you will be able to bring this power to bear in such a way that it doesn't cause too much offense. After all, it is moon sextile Mars. It is not moon square Mars. The sextile is about the combination of ease and effort. That's because the sextile is 2 times 3. A sextile is a 6 of the circle, so 2 times 3 is 6. 2 is the effort, the clash. 3 is ease, things moving, and so yeah, sure, a bit of effort is required, but not a great deal of effort. And for many Virgos, what's been happening recently is that their power and their intensity and their understanding has been building, over a period of weeks, even months, and it's just getting stronger and stronger. It's like some kind of dynamo that is now fully charged, and now that it's fully charged, you can start using this power at your disposal. And with the moon in Gemini sextile Mars in Aries, I think that once you have decided that you want to assert yourself on a particular issue, you're going to be very impressive, and you are going to be able to get things done, and you will have a lot of control. But then there is then the question of how much control do you exercise? That is because Mercury is decile Saturn. So Mercury is your ruler. It's decile Saturn. Mercury and Saturn are 36 degrees apart. That's 1/10 of the circle. So with Mercury decile Saturn, you are going to feel that you do need to make an effort to assert your authority and bring things under your control. And you have to decide how far you want to go. You can go a long way if you want. You can have complete control. If you want control, yeah, you can have it. But of course, if you go too far, you're going to upset people. You might find that there's resistance. And at the same time, if you're in too much of a hurry to get results and you make it all into a big drama, then you might find yourself saying things that you later regret. And that would be a shame, because fundamentally you're in a good position. You're in a position to get your way without having to cause offense, without having to upset people. But if you push things too far, you just might say things which just could spoil everything. So consider how you are going to bring the situation under control. And perhaps you should really focus on controlling yourself and making sure that your own position is as effective as possible, and not feel that you have to push people around or order people around or use strong language, because I think that would be unfortunate. So in that sense, Virgo, I think that you are going to be very effective, but I do think that a certain amount of self-discipline might be necessary. Libra, you're now in a position where you can be a little more optimistic, but it's going to be hard work. You're trying to battle, on one sense, a feeling of seeing new opportunities, with but in another sense, still feeling quite negative about a lot of things. You do feel that it's still hard work. I suppose that may have something to do with the fact that there are planets in Taurus. Okay, the moon has left Taurus. That's true. But we still have Venus and the Sun and Uranus and Jupiter in Taurus. And I'm thinking particularly of that Venus and Sun in Taurus. Taurus is a sign that that Libra doesn't feel entirely comfortable with, and you may feel that something needs to be held back. But if you're holding something back, then it might reach a stage where it just becomes a bit of a problem. It becomes a bit obsessive because there's just simply too much focus on it. Now, with Moon moving into Gemini, that does create the potential for some levity, and I think that is very useful. It's what you need, and I think that what Librans really need now is perspective, especially as Venus, which is your ruler, is aspecting a Mars Saturn midpoint, and so with Venus aspecting a Mars Saturn midpoint, some Librans might have had some very real concerns that things are not right, and that they've tended to be rather negative, and thinking that things can only move from bad to worse. But that is because you've had this single point of focus, and that single point of focus doesn't sit well with Librans. I mean, you're not a Scorpio, obviously. Scorpio, we associate Scorpios with being able to have a single point of focus, and maybe that works for Scorpios for prolonged periods of time, but it doesn't work for Librans. And so you need to perhaps be more Libran, but especially now that the moon has moved into Gemini. You can float around, you can be more experimental, you can sort of move away from your obsessions. It's not a good idea to have obsessions. And with the moon in Gemini sextiling Mars in Aries, I think that you can perhaps benefit from, well, maybe getting out more, or getting out more, talking to people with a different perspective. We always hear, don't we, that how important leadership is. Leadership, got to be a leader. Because people do degrees in leadership. Yeah, it's like here, when you look in American school districts, you always get these superintendents of school districts, and they have these doctorates in educational leadership. I don't know. That just seems a little bit ridiculous to have a doctorate in leadership. But yeah, there are whole academic departments on educational leadership, and there's all this cult of a leader. What about being a follower? Is it so bad to be a follower? And with Moon sextile Mars, I think that there can be some benefit today for Librans in being a follower, taking the lead from someone else. Doesn't mean to say that you have to compromise anything, but there are some dynamic people out there who mean well, and maybe you can benefit from following their lead. Obviously you can't trust everyone. You can't follow the lead of some random stranger. But if there's someone you trust and you find them interesting and exciting, yeah, follow their lead. Maybe they've got some interesting suggestions, and there's no harm in that. In many respects, it's a natural thing to do. So that might be one way of approaching today, because what you don't want to have, Libra, is to just concentrate on your own issues and making them incredibly serious, because you should be getting out of that. This concentration in Taurus, which has encouraged you to be focused on stuff which may be starting to become increasingly negative. This concentration in Taurus is starting to break up, and Moon in Libra should be allowing you to get a broader view, and I think perhaps you can get a broader view helped by another person. Scorpio, you don't want to take yourself too seriously. I think you could. Some danger that you take yourself too seriously. And you may feel that your way is the right way. I mean, I do understand that it often is a Scorpio approach, that Scorpios, they can take themselves seriously. And but if you take yourself too seriously, there is a danger that you make mistakes. For example, if you were to think that you were to be an absolute authority on a subject and be absolutely sure that you were an authority on the subject, you may well have overstated the case. You may not be quite the authority you think you are. Maybe it's on a particular area that you find yourself drawn towards today, where you just really think you know it all. And it does seem a real possibility that you don't know it all. And when you actually come round to really asserting yourself, asserting your authority, you might find that you get yourself into trouble. You might reach a stage where people are listening to you, but you realize that the basis of your authority is somewhat false. So in that sense, Scorpio, a little bit of humility would be a very good idea. Now, I don't want to overstate this. I mean, this is just a warning. On a positive note, we see that the moon is sextile Mars. I mean, Mars is your ruler. Mars rules Scorpio. Moon is sextile Mars, and that gives you the capacity for spontaneous action. The moon is an emotional planet. It's in Gemini. So with that moon in Gemini, I'm hoping that would allow you to see both sides of an argument. It's very important to see both sides, and also to question yourself. Always question yourself. Always question how much you know about a particular subject. You may not know as much as you think. So what happens if you realize that you're moving into a situation that you'd like to be an expert on, but you're not a full expert on? Well, it's not the end of the world. Moon sextile Mars can be about work and preparation, and Mars is in Aries. There is a strong sense in which Mars wants to organize itself, sort itself out, and I think that you're very good at preparation right now and filling in gaps. And so if you need to familiarize yourself with new information and fill those gaps, then I think you can do it. So perhaps you're in a situation where you feel that you want to assert yourself and demonstrate your knowledge. But before telling people that you really know all the answers, do make sure that you really do know all the answers, because I suspect that right now you don't know all the answers. And so by stepping back, reviewing what you know, then you'll see where the holes are, and you'll be able to fill those holes. It may just take a bit of reading, I don't know, watching videos, whatever you do to gain new information, talking to experts. Don't be afraid of talking to experts, talking to people that know more than you, because by doing that, you're just going to be increasing your knowledge base. And so good preparation and humility are going to be very important today if you want to be successful. Sagittarius, I have been a little bit down on you over the last couple of days. I've been a bit negative about what's possible. And I think that with the moon now moving into Gemini, things are starting to improve. I mean, Gemini, after all, is Sagittarius's opposite sign. And so with moon in Gemini, you're better able to understand other people and relate to other people. And I think you're going to be more relaxing company. And with the moon sextile Mars, now is a great time, Sagittarius, for you to just get involved in something that you're good at. You know, there are things that you're good at, and I think perhaps in the past, recent past, you felt that you weren't really able to fully engage. It just seemed that there was one problem after another, and there were distractions, and there was this concern, this worry, and so forth. But that seems to be clearing up now. And I think that you really are able to show the world what you can do. And I think you're going to find that other people are going to be more sympathetic than usual and more understanding of what you need to do. And it's quite possible that with other people's help, you can really start to make things move. And your social skills today, I think, are much better than they were yesterday. I think that you can be quite forthright. You can tell people what you want, and at the same time, you can really make the most of your various connections. And if you feel that you need to make new connections to expand your social circle, then now is certainly a great time to be doing it. You can really reach out to people in a way that is really quite vibrant and exciting, and I think that people are going to respond very well to you. So you don't have to do things alone, but you don't have to compromise. That's really important. You don't have to compromise. If there are things you want to do, then you're going to find the support that you need to find in order to get your way and to find real satisfaction. Though I suppose it needs to be said that a couple of people are worried about something, and you know, if you ask questions, if you ask people questions about what they're doing, what they're thinking about, you might find that at some level they are a bit distracted, and perhaps they're worrying about the way the world is going, and if you give them a chance, they'll want to just tell you what's on their mind, and they are being quite serious about it. So that's a bit of a contradiction there. Yes, on a superficial way, people are prepared to help. You can really get a great deal from people. But I suppose if you were really sensitive, you'd really try to understand, and you really want to try to understand people's overall view of the world. That might create the possibility of having some quite serious conversations about what's happening in this world. And this is to do with Mercury is on the Pluto North Node midpoint. I mentioned that at the beginning of this video, towards when I was talking about the general picture with what's going on astrologically. With Mercury on the Pluto North Node midpoint, Mercury does really represent other people, and it represents what's going on with them. And so perhaps people are concerned about what's going on in the world. It may well be that there are a few people who have their own issues, their own setbacks. Maybe they're putting a brave face on it. And if you can really use your sensitivity, you may actually have an understanding of what is bothering people. And in certain cases, Sagittarius, you can actually offer a helping hand. You can help people get a feel for what's happening and what's going wrong, and you can perhaps help them navigate whatever they're going through. But it's up to you. It depends how sensitive you want to be, how compassionate you want to be. I mean, broad message today is that it's a day for just being pretty optimistic, getting your way, and other people are prepared to help. But it should be a two-way process. If you are benefiting from other people, make sure that you're able to help them and be ready to stop and listen if necessary. Capricorn. The moon is now in Gemini, and from a Capricorn view, I suppose, with the moon in Gemini, things maybe get a little slower. And I think, Capricorn, the reason for that would be that you're doing some more thinking, and you can see that things aren't perfect, and you're able to sort of question what people say, and you're realizing that what they say and assurances can't be entirely trusted. So that means, Capricorn, that you're going to have to spend a bit of time checking. I think checking is perhaps the key word today. There are things that need to be checked, and I understand if you check things, there's always the accusation of that you're being, what's the phrase, obsessive compulsive. But it's not obsessive compulsive. I mean, it might seem obsessive compulsive to check everything. Have you made a mistake? Has someone else made a mistake? But I think it's worth doing, at the very least, from a perspective of peace of mind. And that creates a situation whereas if you check everything, if you make sure that everything is all in order, that everything has been sorted out, then you're going to be a lot more confident in terms of what you're doing and planning your own actions, because planning needs to be grounded with confidence. So yes, you can't be too careful. There's no point in being too careful, and it's not because I'm saying anything's going wrong. I just think it's the right thing to do, and I think that you benefit from a sextile between the moon and Mars, and that sextile between the moon and Mars does allow you to cover a lot of detail very quickly. You're not slow about it. So if you're trying to cover ground in whatever you're doing, whether you're at home, at work, traveling, you can cover a lot of ground very quickly, and you can cover a lot of detailed ground very quickly. And I think that you'll be well pleased with the results, though don't expect anything particularly wonderful to happen, because it's not that kind of day. It's a day for making sure that everything is in order. Though, in terms of relationships, you may find that some of the people you know, some of the people you're involved with, are actually quite dynamic. They want action. They want things to happen, and they can make things happen. And I think this is perhaps quite a good thing, because, right now, there's some danger that you're just a little bit stuck in your ways, that you're still reluctant to make a move. And by getting someone else suggesting that you do make a move, someone else providing a little bit of dynamism in your life, could be just what you need. I think you need a little bit of a spark, and I think that spark can be found from the outside in the form of another person. Aquarius, you're in quite a good position, Aquarius, because you're able to assert yourself, and you're able to assert your unique abilities. That's so important if you're an Aquarius. Aquarians, they are individuals, and they want to be seen as individuals, and they want to be able to tune into their unique contribution, and you can definitely find that. And you are certainly helped by the fact that the moon is in Gemini. Moon Gemini, it's an air sign. Aquarius is an air sign. So when the moon is in Gemini, things move and you feel comfortable. And I think you feel that people are, and the world in general, is better able to listen to you. And in the recent past, you may have felt that you weren't being listened to, that there was no point in saying anything. But now I think you're feeling a lot more confident. You are realizing that you do have an audience. It's not necessarily a huge audience. You don't need a huge audience. You just need enough people to perhaps give you some feedback, but constructive feedback. It's got to be constructive feedback. It's not a time for compromising in a massive way. The fundamental way you are acting and is the right way. It's not a time for doing things other people's way. That's absolutely not it. That's not what today is about. And I think that you're able to gather more information. Information actually could be quite important. In order to be really successful and to feel accomplished, you need to have as much information as possible. And actually, today is a great day for asking questions. And you can ask questions in a way that's very playful. So if there's something you want to know, you don't have to sort of go through a checklist and say, "Oh, can you tell me this and can you tell me that?" You can express these questions in a way that doesn't seem intrusive. So, this might be the case that, say, for example, I don't know, you're an investigator and you need to get information. But you don't want to draw attention to yourself. You'll just know how to get the information and get people to talk, just in a sort of a natural way. So there will be a certain levity there. And in terms of close relationships, don't forget that the sun is your relationship ruler, because the sun rules Leo, and Leo is your opposite sign. And the sun is still making a sextile aspect to Saturn. Now, that sextile aspect to Saturn was exact a couple of days ago, but it's still very much in force. And so with Sun sextile Saturn, that does indicate that you and another person have a natural connection with each other. It's maybe not desperately exciting, but it's just a natural rapport. And you have a good understanding of your responsibilities. The other person has a good understanding of your boundaries, and it's really working well. And at the moment, the Sun is conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and it's been conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint for some time. And so with the Sun conjunct the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, that's suggestive of someone who is has a positive view of the world, is optimistic, and has good ideas and wants the best for everyone. And so Aquarius, it's not a time for being harsh or for asking too many questions. I know you've got lots of questions to ask, but once you've identified that person who is genuinely optimistic, who really wants the best for you, then you need to hang on to this person and you need to nurture this person, because it seems to be that when you're with the right person, that right connection can really make a big difference. Pisces, you perhaps feel that you need a break. There's been a lot going on. You just had the new moon. The new moon might have been exciting. It certainly feels, Pisces, that it's the start of something new, and sort of a new cycle. The moon is now waxing, but just right now, the moon is leaving Taurus, because yesterday we had the new moon, or perhaps it was the day before, depending on your time zone, and that new moon was in Taurus, and that was quite intense. But now the moon is in Gemini, so we've got the Sun in Taurus, moon is in Gemini. So with the moon moving into Gemini, it can be a time when Pisceans feel that they need to relax a bit. Find somewhere secure, some place where they can just be themselves without having to apologize or explain. And if you can do that, I think you'd be doing yourself the world of good. But it's not about doing nothing. After all, the moon is making a sextile to Mars. And I said to you, I don't know, quite recently, I said that with these planets in Aries, particularly Mars in Aries, and Mercury in Aries, from your perspective, Aries is a sign that can be quite money orientated. And so with moon in Gemini sextile Mars in Aries, it could be that there is a little bit of work to do in a financial sense. And when I say work, I don't mean anything too onerous, anything that's that's too difficult. It seems that you'll have a sort of a natural facility with money and a natural sort of understanding of how money should be used, whether or not you're making enough money. And if you feel that something needs to be done in terms of money, the moon sextile Mars may allow you to take the initiative, but in a way that's not going to upset anyone, because it's moon sextile Mars. It's perhaps about using your talent and your sensitivity to raise a financial issue and to get a satisfactory response without causing too much offense. Turning to the specific area of relationships, it's possible that if you get really close to someone, you might feel that you're having to deal with just too much. Having to deal with with other people's issues may not be something you want to do, and I do think that certain people are going to be overly keen to dump their issues and concerns onto you. And I think that you're going to have an idea about what kind of people are likely to do that. So before getting close to anyone, do think it through. Do think it through about whether or not you're really prepared to deal with it all. I mean, some people you can be in touch with and be talking to, and you'll know that it's not going to be complicated. Other people, you have an intuition that, things could be complicated. And once you start talking to them, it might be difficult to stop because there's so much they maybe want to reveal, and talking about stuff which is just complicated, is irrelevant, and you could in certain situations waste a lot of time talking to people who don't fully respect your time. So think carefully before getting in contact with anyone, especially if you've had recent issues with them. And now I want to switch from the astrology to the I Ching, and I ask the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 13, a fellowship with men. Maybe this is a sign that the moon is in Gemini. Moon in Gemini is quite a sociable sign, isn't it? Quite a sociable configuration. Having a moon in Gemini, we're looking for variety. We're looking for people to be with, but we don't really want to trivialize it because it does seem that other people do matter, and whatever we're engaged in, we find that we have to relate to other people, and it may feel that in order to get what we want, we're going to have to have fellowship with men. And I think that this can work up to a point. So to begin with, if we associate with people, it feels relatively natural. People have to be, it's just important that everyone is open with one another. So if people are open with one another, then that's a good sign that they can be useful, and we can take advantage of all of the groups that we are members of, or could be members of. But we do get a problem with the second line, because the first line moves and the second line moves. You see, there's that broken line. We've got 6 lines that are unbroken, but we've got that second line moving, and there's a danger there. And the danger is this: it's that when you're with people, more people, the bigger the problem. People can form into factions. You realize that everyone has got their own interests. So fellowship with men is supposed to be about there being, a universal interest that everyone is following. What's good for one, what's good for the individual is good for the group. Reality is that everyone is actually thinking about their own core interests. And it doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter how unselfish they appear. You know, they might say they're helping the community. It doesn't matter. It's their own agenda. So we get chaos here as everyone starts to follow their own agenda. And so that might mean that you get little groups forming. You get, you are aware that when you look at your social life, or for example, if you're going into work, I suppose going into work is where the career setting is where there is most rivalry. You can see these little factions here, there, and everywhere. And that is not really what it's about. That's going to make it really difficult to get anything done. Then the top line moves. Top line is about, in the end, finding some common purpose. There's not much emotion there. There's not much of a sense of universal oneness, but it seems that eventually people come together and say, yes, we might have our own interests, but okay, we can all work towards this goal, perhaps. And this moves to, this hexagram moves to hexagram 28, which is preponderance of the great, and we've had this quite recently. So we try to make things easier for ourselves by interacting with the group. You know, we think that maybe as a group we can get faster results than if we're doing things alone. But in the end, we realize that it's still down to us. So, which raises the question: was it worth the effort? You know, we try our hardest to engage other people, and it sort of looked good at times. Then people started to think about their own selfish interests, and in the end, here we are, preponderance of the great. We have got a big burden on our back, and we have to carry it. Remember, this is not a literal burden. I'm not encouraging anyone to carry heavy objects. It's a big burden, and we have to see it. We have to carry it through. We can't stop. In fact, if we were to stop, we would just be dragged down. We would not make any further progress. We just have to keep going. Be resilient. Realize that it's down to us to make this thing happen. People can say what they like, they can offer support, but we know that it's half-hearted support, that people are fundamentally self-interested, perhaps, and you know, it's down to us to carry it across the line. And if we keep moving, I think we will be able to carry it across the line, and I think that will give us a certain grim satisfaction. And after that, I want to go back to the astrology and consider this concept of converse transits, converse solar returns. So yesterday I talked about converse transits and converse solar returns with reference to Prince Harry and Princess Diana. And I thought I'd carry on with this theme because it does raise, it does raise a number of issues about what time is. It also raises an issue, a technical issue, and is that I understand that you're watching this and you have access to various tools for calculating charts, and some people don't feel that they want to spend a few $100s buying an astrology program, and that they have to rely on stuff that is freely available. And Astro.com, for example, has some great horoscope calculation tools, but it doesn't calculate everything. And so calculating a converse transit without paid software could be difficult. And this is why perhaps if you're thinking about, if you want to play with converse transits, it might be easier to begin by working with converse solar returns. So they're more easy to visualize. So, if you are born on, I don't know, the 1st of June 1960, then it's quite easy, isn't it? Because you're 1st of June 1960, then that would mean that you want to know what's happened when you were 40. You would do your calculation, you would do your solar return for the year 2000. And then if you wanted to do it from a converse perspective, you're born in 1960, then you would look at your solar return set for 1920, which would be 40 years earlier. When you're talking about transits for the precise date, that is a little more complicated. You don't necessarily need astrology software paid astrology software to work with these transits, but it can be a bit difficult. So I'm kind of aware of that problem, and I can't make assumptions about people having software. But I don't know. I take the view. I don't know how much a software costs. It's something like $300. It depends how important astrology is for you. People spend $300 on all sorts of things. I don't know. People spend a lot more than $300. I don't know. They go for cruises. They buy cars. I mean, I don't know. $300 maybe isn't so much money, but I just thought I wanted to mention that. But looking at Prince William, so Prince William, his chart. Let's look at Prince William's chart. I looked at Prince Harry's chart. So Prince William was born on June the 21st, 1982, and I've already looked at his chart a lot. And so his mother was killed on August the 31st, 1997. So he was 15 when his mother died. And that would mean that if we wanted to look at his solar return for just before his mother died, we'd set up a solar return for approximately June the 21st, 1997, just a couple of months before his mother's death. But if we want to set up a converse solar return, we would set up a chart for 15 years before he was born. So that 15 years before he was born was 1967. June the 21st, 1967. And that's what I did. I set up the solar return for June the 21st, 1967. Now, June the 21st, 1967, if you're interested, was apparently the peak of the 1967 Summer of Love. It was like, if you could say that was peak 60s, June the 21st, 1967. And I think there was a solstice celebration in San Francisco at the time, 15 years before Prince William was born. I'm quite confused about that. What relevance that has for Prince William, I don't know. But here is Prince William's solar return for 1967. June the 22nd, 1967. The sun returns to where it was when he was born. And what is incredible about this chart is that June the 22nd, 1967, it was the solstice. And it was also a solstice full moon. There is the sun, 0 degrees 6 Cancer, moon, 0 degrees 10 Capricorn. So his solar return was his converse solar return, set for 15 years before he was born, was on an exact full moon. It was on the full moon. And there's Chiron. Chiron hadn't been discovered yet. Chiron wasn't discovered until 1977. So Chiron was yet to be discovered. And so Chiron was on the sun-moon midpoint. Chiron was in the 10th house. 10th house is connected to the mother. And so the idea of the wound with the mother is there, but I think it's a full moon. And the fact that it was exactly on a full moon does suggest that something big could happen in that year. So you could then, in theory, look back at the years before you were born if you have an ephemeris, and if you see some big astrological event, you could ask yourself, well, how long before I was born? So if you're going through the ephemeris and you notice a big event, say 55 years before you were born, then maybe when you're 55, that is when that event actually might happen. So I thought that the Prince William chart was really quite impressive. But why not look at another chart? Someone perhaps less savoury from Prince William. I mean, let's look at Hitler's chart. I mean, as you know, I like looking at Hitler's chart. It's a fascinating chart. Someone who has had a dramatic impact on the world, obviously. So if this technique of converse transits is really working, we would expect to see it, wouldn't we? So I've sort of focused on his death, but what was the big moment for Hitler? Well, it's when he became Chancellor of Germany on January the 30th, 1933. And so he was born in 1889. So if you take, he was when he became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, he had his 43rd birthday in 1932. So we would look at the solar return for 43 years before he was born. And so we would look at we would simply look at a solar return for 1846. So let's look at this. 1846, 43 years before he was born. So that's like the middle of the 19th century for trying to predict what's going to happen to him in 1933. So there's solar return for 1846, and I'm not saying it's completely dramatic, but you can see that the moon is in Pisces on the midheaven, and we got Venus in Pisces on the midheaven. So that could be quite good. That moon on the 10th house may indicate someone about to take power. If he's, imagine he's asking a question in like late 1932. Is he going to, he's just had his birthday in 1932. Is this a chart of someone who's going to become Chancellor of Germany? Well, I think perhaps with moon on the midheaven in Pisces, that is a sign that 33 could be good for him. And then you can consider his converse transits. So the converse transit is when we actually take that date, January the 30th, 1933. We run it through. We work out how many years he's been on the planet, and we take it backwards. This actually takes us back to July the 11th, 1845. So these are the positions of the planets on July the 11th, 1845. And we're going to compare that with his natal chart, and so there was Venus in 1845. So Venus on July the 11th, 1845 was at 339 Leo. So Venus was exactly on his midheaven. Now, Venus on your midheaven is a sure sign. Well, not a sure sign, but it's a sign of success. And Pluto was on his descendant, and there was on that day there was a Mercury-Pluto square, and that Mercury-Pluto square was hitting his descendant and hitting his Mercury. So Pluto was really hitting him there on that day. It could have gone either way, perhaps, having Pluto on the descendant, but Pluto hitting his descendant would seem, from a transiting point of view, really helped him be successful. Also, on that day, on July the 11th, 1845, Mars was at 0 degrees Pisces, and so he has 0 degrees 48. So remember, when you're looking at a converse transit, Mars is going backwards. So the transit for the next day, January, if you were the converse transit for the next day, Mars will be going backwards in time. But here we can see that Mars was making a sextile to his Sun. So I think in Hitler's case, looking at 1933 from a converse perspective, there is some evidence that it was actually working. What about someone still alive, like Donald Trump? So Donald Trump, and what about his solar return for 18? So he became president when he was 70. So if we want to know about Donald Trump's solar return before he was elected president in 2016, we would look at a solar return set for 1876. So we're going right back, 1876. What were the planets doing in 1876 on Trump's birthday in 1876? And, well, Sun's on the midheaven. I've set this for New York. So Sun on the midheaven is a sign of success, classic sign of success. Moon is conjunct Saturn, but you could argue that the moon appears to be moving towards a conjunction of Saturn, but maybe because it's a converse, we should regard it as moving away from Saturn. But anyway, Trump's solar return for the year he became president, we can see that the Sun is on the midheaven. So that does seem to work. But do converse progressions, converse transits only work for individuals? What about countries? And in these videos, I have looked at the USA's chart quite a lot. So there's the USA's chart for July the 4th, 1776. So what was the biggest event in American history, the most dramatic event in American history? Well, I suppose you could say that it was Pearl Harbor. And so what you could do is you could work out the USA's converse transits for Pearl Harbor. So in other words, you take however many years it is from 1776 to 1941, you take it backwards. And if you take that backwards, you get to you go all the way back to February the 1st, 1611. So you look at the positions of the planets on February the 1st, 1611, and you then compare it with the USA's chart. And it's because February the 1st, 1611 corresponds to December the 7th, 1941. So on inner wheel, we have the United States' chart. On the outer wheel, we have converse transits, in other words, the positions of the planets on February the 1st, 1611, which, remember, it's that distance between 1776 and Pearl Harbor, but you take it backwards the other way, and you take it to 1611. And there is Uranus on February the 1st, 1611. Uranus was at 13 Gemini, exactly on America's descendant, which, and on the United States' Mars-Uranus midpoint. So Uranus, even though it hadn't even been discovered in 1611, was right on the United States' descendant. And that is classic sign of an attack. So yes, I think we can perhaps look at what was going on at the beginning of the 17th century to understand what's happening in 1941. Likewise, the United States had a Neptune return. So Neptune on February the 1st, 1611, was at 2143 Virgo, which was less than a degree away from the United States' natal Neptune. So a very Neptunian event. This was a time where the United States' Neptune was going to be very heavily focused, and there we have it, the Pearl Harbor, the sinking of a great chunk of its Pacific fleet. And so this chart does indicate that perhaps converse transits can be useful in the case of a nation. Finally, I want to consider Joe Biden's converse transits, and not for any particular event. I want to actually look at it for now. From a converse perspective, what is Joe Biden experiencing? And just remember that you can't just look at someone's future on the basis of or present on the basis of one predictive system. But this video is about converse transit, so just quickly see what is happening with Joe Biden. So here are his transits. These are for positions, by the way, for June the 3rd, 1861. So he's 80. So you take this is 80 years plus years before he was born, in order to understand what's happening right now. And I find the position of Uranus somewhat worrying. Uranus is at 12 degrees 9 Gemini. There's actually a Sun-Uranus conjunction right now. On June the 3rd, 1861, there was a Sun-Uranus conjunction. And right now, in fact, over the next couple of days, Joe Biden is going to be feeling that Sun-Uranus conjunction which happened in 1861. So probably Joe Biden has to be careful how he goes. And plus the fact that Uranus is at 12 degrees 9, which is moving towards his descendant. It's not there yet. But I wonder, that 12 degrees 9 Gemini, can we take Joe Biden's converse transit at 12.9 Gemini and relate it to another chart? The fact that the USA's chart is at 12 degrees 9, has a descendant at around 12.13 Gemini. Because that Uranus is at 12 degrees 9 Gemini is very close to where it was at the time of the United States' converse transit set for 1611, which triggered Pearl Harbor. I don't know whether you can do this, but I do think that certainly if Biden is re-elected as president, Uranus will start moving back towards his descendant. Remember, it's a converse transit, so it's always going backwards. So over his next term, if he has a next term, Uranus will be hitting his descendant. And so for Biden, I think it seems to be something we should watch. Of course, we don't know how well it's going to work, but I think that Sun-Uranus conjunction is concerning. So we'll see what happens to Biden and America over the next couple of days. I should point out that Saturn, his converse Saturn, so Saturn in 1861, Saturn was at 3 degrees Virgo. So Saturn is starting to be square Biden's ascendant and square Biden's Uranus and conjunct his North Node. So if, and that may be a big if converse transit genuinely work, then I would have expected the next week or two to be pretty difficult for Joe Biden, and that's Saturn square his ascendant and square his Uranus. And we mustn't forget he's head of state. What is happening to him? What is happening to America? But I'm not 100% sure that converse transits work as well as direct transits, but if they do, then Joe Biden's chart does. Joe Biden's current converse transits, what's going on in 1861, we should pay close attention to that. Okay, that's all I'm going to say for today. I just wanted to continue with the theme of converse transits as I brought them up yesterday, and I hope you found that of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I would of course be grateful if you were to like it. If you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed, I'd be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.